mode. Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to See the Best of the World on Your Next Vacation. My name is Erin Elliott and I'm the Senior Director of Campus Engagement for the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. We've had nearly 400 alumni and friends register for this webinar and I'm absolutely thrilled that so many of you are sharing your time with us today. Today's webinar is part of a new free series being offered by the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, where we're having conversations with experts about career, life, and learning topics. The webinar is being recorded and will be viewable afterwards at www.minnesotalumni.org/alumni webinar series. Just give us a few business days to post it on our website. We'll also be sending a reminder email. We're doing more career and life stage webinars between now and April, and those webinars will be posted as they occur for on-demand viewing off our website, so you can access them wherever you are, whenever you'd like. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. If you have joined the presentation listening with your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to listen over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane of your GoToWebinar panel and dial information will be displayed. If you experience any audio difficulties while listening via your computer speakers, this can be caused by having multiple software applications open, which can use your computer's bandwidth and affect network performance. Please feel free to close any unnecessary applications on your computer. Questions are welcome, and you may submit them at any time. We want this webinar to be very interactive and hope to get to as many of your questions as possible. Please type your questions in the questions pane on your GoToWebinar control panel. And thanks to my colleague Beth Beck for helping monitor the question stream today. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our featured presenter, Matt Chua, a 2004 U of M graduate and current MBA student who has traveled to more than 50 countries and has learned tricks, trade-offs, and must-see locations in each. From Japan to Australia, Colombia to Antarctica, and everywhere in between, he wants to help people see more of the amazing world in which we live. He is currently writing a book for how to experience the best of the world on short vacations. I'm very thankful he has joined us today to talk about travel in a session that will be highly interactive as he will answer your questions regarding travel logistics, budgeting, and must-see destinations. He will also highlight 5 fast-changing places to visit now and provide tips on traveling on a budget. Matt, welcome to the webinar. Matt? Oops. Here we go. Hi, Matt.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us during your lunch hour. Hopefully this will be a fun presentation. And if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to chime in via the question box on the side. So to give you a little background on myself, I am a University of Minnesota 2004 alum. I enjoyed it so much I've come back to school, and I'm in the Carlson MBA program now. A lot of the things featured today are going to come from a kind of mega trip my wife and I did around about 930 days around the world. We packed our lives literally into small bags and then went out to see what there was, and as we went, we found there was more and more to see. I'm going to really focus on kind of my travel priorities. I know different people are different. I love to go on to the outdoors to eat the local food. My wife and I are huge street food eaters. We do cities and urban areas as well, and then a lot of historical things. So today you're going to see a lot of photos from that, and a lot of things that we saw independently, but some of these you're going to as well need to see on a tour. Today, I'm going to first cover 5 places to go now. These are fast-changing places in the world, but if you have any questions about other destinations, feel free to chime in and ask any questions along the way. I think right before I get into this, I see a question has come up, how to communicate in countries where you're not fluent in that country's language. Looking at this list of 5 places, I do not speak any of the languages in any of them. What happens is English is the language of travel, of the service industry, and honestly, English will get you a long way. It's probably the most useful for a world traveler. There are other times where it comes down to pure charades. You need to try to communicate with people really sometimes not using words, and that creates part of the adventure and part of the fun of it. So let's get into the changing places to go now. China. China is a place that I think everyone needs to see. It gets a lot of press. China's kind of given as a broad stroke that it's one country, this vast billion people walking in one direction. I think it's important for people to really go see it and understand that it's a lot more like the U.S. than really any country I've been to. There is diversity, and it is changing very, very rapidly. So one of the key parts to see is the ancient diversity. China has existed for thousands of years. It's one of the longest continuously lived in civilizations, and there is an endless array of beautiful things. You know, you think of the Great Wall and the Terracotta Warriors, but the further you go into the country, there's more and more to see. In addition to the old diversity, there's a huge modern diversity of cities being built in very different ways. This is a picture of Shanghai, which is gorgeous, totally modern, though other large cities have really maintained that old core. There's also great culinary diversity. It is one of the best eating countries in the world. You can go get all sorts of different food, different flavors. It's not what we think of as Chinese food in America. It is a wide, wide array of flavors and tastes, and just going there to eat alone would be great. One aspect of China that makes it great to visit is the diverse transport. This is a bullet train. They have some of the best train infrastructure in the entire world. They have fast trains and trains that make it to basically every city. I just love riding on trains, seeing the landscapes, and this is honestly one of the best countries to do it in. Switching gears, Myanmar, it's actually a neighbor of China, is newly open, so it's worth going to see now because there's a lot of things that haven't changed, haven't been westernized, and it's kind of the antithesis of China in that China is fast changing. Myanmar really steps back to to kind of the old roots. All boys must be in the monastery for 1 year, and I think it's worth going to see how they try to maintain their traditions, not to mention it's a known fact that children are cute, monks are cute, children monks are even better. There are so many opportunities to go and see and interact with the monasteries throughout the country, and a lot of the old traditions still exist, like the traditional markets. What really stood out to us in Myanmar were the people. We literally needed directions somewhere, and one of these monks did not understand what we were saying, so he brought us back to the monastery, and even though they were fasting all day, they brought us into the monastery and actually fed us while they themselves couldn't eat. And I think that was how the country was. You just kept getting invited into people's homes, offered things, and they're really interested because they were fairly cut off from the world. Along with that, there are these temples that rival Angkor Wat. This is one of the largest pagodas in the world. It is topped with a 76-carat diamond, an enormous diamond, and this is made out of gold. This is several $billion worth of gold formed into a stupa topped with rubies, diamonds, and everything. In addition to that is the old school area of Bagan. This is really starting to come on the map. You've probably seen it in things like Anthony Bourdain. there are thousands of temples built across this vast plain, which each one has unique attributes that make this worth going to see as well. Switching gears from the cultures and the real changing human side of China and Myanmar, a place that also needs to be visited is Nepal. And this has ever-changing natural beauty. It is worth seeing simply because it has mountains and landscapes like nowhere else in the world. This mountain kind of in the middle, the black rock, that's actually the peak of Mount Everest. You can hike right up to Kalapatar and view the mountain, see the sunrise, and see really a whole different set of villages where you can be out hiking on your own, and that's something that I love to do, and I love to see these beautiful scenes. We did the Everest Base Camp trek along with the Three Passes trek, where we actually went around the three valleys of Mount Everest. And along the way, we also did the Annapurna Circuit, which is another very, very popular hike. And along the way, you get to interact with the local culture. We still are not sure whether this woman actually had a store or she just served me breakfast while she was serving her child breakfast. But I was in a moment of need of food, and it appeared to be a store, but looking back, we aren't sure whether people are just that friendly and willing to serve you breakfast along the way. The trails are unparalleled. The trails aren't there just for hikers. It is the way that people get around, and you can go to these ancient villages that have stood the test of time and also see a lot of ancient traditions. So we'll have these cultural sites, whether you're hiking or in the next one in Kathmandu. This is actually a local religious ceremony, which it's great to see the combination of Kathmandu, a growing, changing place, the incredible views of the mountains, but then also see how people are living their life. Now we're going to change gears to the one place that we get a lot of questions about, and that's North Korea. And I see there are questions that I got along the way of how do you get visas, and Myanmar and North Korea are great examples. They both require visas ahead of time, and North Korea requires you go on a tour. I think that's the most interesting part of it. North Korea, like China, we hear from the outside of the countries are really framed in our mind by media and by outsiders, and I see there's value in going and seeing and experiencing, okay, what is it like? Obviously, when you go to North Korea, you get their view, or really the military's view of the country, but it's worth seeing because it changes kind of how you view the country itself, whether you're for it or against it. What you'll see is a lot of kind of epic buildings, scenes. Epic is the word we use to describe it. You have something like this giant road with no cars coming down it. This is one of the larger plazas like Red Square in Russia. And when they're not doing a military parade through it, there really aren't many people there. They also love their kind of epic war trophies. So this is things they've collected during the Korean War. They want to take you to show kind of their strength. And when you're getting the tours, you start to understand that a lot of the local people definitely have one view of the world just the same way we have a different view of the world. And it is worth getting the other side of the story, whether you agree with it or not. It was very, very interesting to see the pride that the country has, and from what they're taught and what they believe, this is absolutely the way. There's no way to explain the scale of a statue like this, and they're everywhere. I think in Eastern Europe there were many, many places that had statues like this that got torn down after communism. But if I could have stood a person there, you'd understand that a live person is probably the size of a boot or a shoe of one of these people. And this is throughout the entire place. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to go to North Korea was they host the world's largest musical. This is a 100,000 performer musical. It's called the Airing Games. It occurs every year in the fall, and it pays homage to their founders. So what they have to do because of the technologies and having people is their backdrop is actually 10,000 children simultaneously flipping cards that creates an effect just like in a giant screen in TCF Stadium or something. It's phenomenal, the amount of training that goes into it, and this is something where there are schools for it. Children start at age 6, and it's kind of a lifelong communist job. It's something that I'd always heard about, but I had never seen something of this scale. It's like the Beijing opening ceremonies on steroids. And then everything comes down to the military. There is no avoiding the military in North Korea. Everything is about the pride and the power and the strength of the country, of the military. You also get to see some kind of epic control things where this is a tour guide that we had, and they dress almost as though they came right out of The Simpsons. I see there's a question here in DPRK, do you have to pray to past leaders? No, we don't. They definitely pay homage to their old leaders or the ideas that have been told of their old leaders, but no, you're never worshiping them in a praying sense. Now, moving back to kind of the nature aspect, Antarctica, why go now? It's melting. It is changing, and it is like nowhere else. I really wanted to go to Antarctica, but I also had a lot of questions of, is it worth it? Am I just going to see a bunch of snow? Can't I go outside Duluth and see that? It is gorgeous, but let me tell you about how you get there. First, you have to go through the Drake Passage. There is no avoiding that, really. There are some flights, but you can't have the same experience as getting down on the ground, and all the world's oceans come together. I can't tell you from this picture of what strait, the boat, the land, or the boat or the horizon. It really is this rough. I have never been tossed and turned as much as I have on that boat. And I see a question that's come across about doing Antarctica on a budget or the price. The cost of going to Antarctica is extremely high if you go and pay the list rate. If you go to Abercrombie and Kent or National Geographic or any of the very few tour operators, the list price is extraordinarily high. What you have to do is buy kind of a last-minute ticket. So we paid a little under $4,000 a person for 10 days. There were people on our boat who, for that roughly the same experience, paid $12,000 to $20,000 because they paid the list rate. Yes, I do see someone coming across. G Adventures goes to Antarctica too. I believe they have their own boat. There are a couple operators. I think G Adventures generally has some of the more affordable options. But again, if you can do that last minute deal, if you can be somewhat flexible, you can get extraordinarily good deals. Someone says they were in Ushuaia last month and they had cruises for around $4,000 for a 10 to 11 day cruise. That seems about right, and that currently is as cheap as it's going to get. People, I see a question here. Do people get sick, as in violently sick? Yes. Yes, they do. There's no avoiding that unless you live on a boat like one of our friends did. But here's what you get rewarded with. You can see landscapes like nowhere else on Earth. The Himalayas are gorgeous because of how tall and the scale of them. Well, Antarctica is very similar, but flooded. And so all of a sudden you don't have to do that 20-day hike to go through it. You get to go through it on a boat while eating beef tenderloin. And that does make it a little bit better than the hikes. You'll get to see lots of calm waters and also icebergs. The idea of kind of refraction and how light works is, to me, was a little bit unbelievable. I could believe it from the science, but when you get to see it in life, the reflections off of the actual icebergs, you start to see all the different colors come out. You'll also get to see wildlife. The animals, because there aren't many humans there, they don't have experience with it. They come very close. There are times where you're going to find yourself backing away from them. And we were there during penguin molting season, so this is a young penguin kind of getting his swimming feathers. And part of parenting in Antarctica for penguins is mothers making their children chase them around to get food. It gets them up. It gets them exercising. It's hilarious to watch. These are not the best land animals, and we were there in, I'm going to be slightly off. I hope my wife isn't listening. I think it was January, February, but I can look that up, or we can look at it later. And that was great because it was a little bit warmer. No, it couldn't have been. January, February is our winter, so yes, their summer. It was a little bit warmer, and that's when the penguins were molting and playing, and that provided a very unique view of the country, or sorry, of the continent. You also get to learn a lot. These cruises, what you're paying for is obviously traveling the distance, but it's also all about the educational content of the people there that are going to be on the boat. They're there to teach you about the birds and about the land. They'll have geologists and marine biologists. You'll get up close to whales and see different things. We went on a trip specifically so we could camp on the ice. This is the only image here that we did not take. One of our friends did, and this is us in the tent. It's actually about midnight, 1 a.m. with an extremely long exposure, and that it was worth getting out there and really being able to see this, kind of see the stars or what you could, but also see the endless day. Now, I've run through these kind of 5 places very quickly. We'll get into some travel tips, but also I do see a couple key questions that relate to things. I'm sorry, I have to read them as we go. There's a question about what camera we used. We had a Nikon D90. The body was not what really made the images beautiful. We have a 24-70 2.8 lens. It is absolutely the photographer's walk-around lens, and it's worth every penny if you're doing a trip like this, if you're willing to carry around a big heavy camera. There are better and better small cameras every day that will allow you to, oh, sorry, my wife has chimed in. We were there in Antarctica from February 17th to February 28th, and March is really the end of the season. So on cameras, I do recommend a lot of these kind of Olympus Micro Four Thirds if you want a little bit more manual control. Otherwise, we also have a Canon, an S110. I think there's a slightly newer model, but that is a very good camera we can put in our pocket. We use it almost every day for taking photos. What are other questions that have come up? Okay, let's go into a couple travel tips because I can see their specific questions. So one area I'm really interested in, and I can't say enough, when you look at these images and you think about this trip, a lot of times it comes back to, oh, we were traveling for years at a time, or how do you do it without time? And actually most of these people, most of these places can be seen on a week or two of vacation. A lot of my friends, they're working professionals, and if you plan correctly, you can fit a great trip into just 1 or 2 weeks of PTO. And that's actually, I'm trying to create a travel guide for that, for working professionals to be able to do that. To really make a successful big trip, you got to know what you want to do. So what I want to go do in a place might be totally different than what you want to do. And when you read something like Lonely Planet, it tends to say everything's great. Oh, this is great, this is fun, this is a must-do. Everything is not a must-do for everyone. You kind of have to learn your travel style and then do that and really seek that out. And then accept that you're going to miss some things, but that's okay, because being able to wander and being able to see certain things that you want to see are really worth it. And then the two other important things are staying near the site. Make sure that you aren't going to be wasting travel time. Some cities, you think of Paris, like it is enormous, and it's worth paying the little bit extra to stay near the things that you want to see. And then also get on local time as quickly as you can. I totally believe in brute forcing this. I like to stay up as much as I need to the night before and then kind of go to sleep when I get on the plane on the local time of my destination. This isn't something that I think a lot of people like to do, but you're going to have discomfort on one end or the other, and I'd rather have the discomfort while I'm at home than when I'm at my destination and a place I want to travel. So to travel on a budget, that's another question that we get very often, and I've seen some of these come up. Money, I no longer use money changers. I carry US dollars, a little bit of US dollars. This is truly for emergencies. And then I use ATMs. ATMs will give you a currency exchange generally at the banking rate. And then I'm totally not paid or endorsed, but both Schwab and Fidelity have checking accounts with free ATMs everywhere in the world. So if you have a Schwab or a Fidelity ATM card, you can walk to any Wells Fargo ATM, Las Vegas casino ATM, and when it says it's going to charge you that $2 or that $4, you just hit OK, and they will refund your account that money. So you never have to pay a fee. This will save an enormous amount of money in a lot of places. We book tickets directly, and so if you're going to fly Delta, book it from Delta. The only exceptions to that are if you can find something through a consolidator. There are times where hotels are absolutely cheaper on Expedia or Hotels.com, and it's definitely worth. Someone is saying Scottrade also has a free ATM. And I believe that. I think a lot of these kind of online brokerage have free ATMs. Make sure you look and see if there's a limit to it, and you can decide whether you can stay in that limit. Some say $25 a month is a limit. I know Capital One offers up to that amount. Some you can have unlimited. So Schwab, there were months that they refunded more than $100 in ATM fees for us. Also, find budget airlines. So AirAsia, I know it's right now probably a little bit of a tainted name to Americans, but they are a huge airline in Asia, Ryanair, EasyJet. Today I was introduced to WOW Airlines. For those of you on the East Coast, they are running round-trip tickets to Europe right now for $400 to $500 apparently, including taxes. So find budget airlines. As one person said, they're not in large booking sites. It will take a little bit of research, and you will need to go. You'll need to go look. A lot of times, Wikipedia is very good. You'll find airline names there, and then be able to go to it, or else just start Googling discount airline Germany, discount airline Thailand. I see a comment here that AirAsia pre-buy everything or you pay huge fees. This goes with absolutely every airline. If you know you're going to need to check a bag, make sure you prepay it and be really careful. A lot of international discount airlines will actually weigh or measure your bags and say, will say, nope, you can't take this on, and then charge an exorbitant fee. And yep, so fees are coming up quite often. The budget airline to Europe that I just mentioned was WOW. It's like WOW Air. Let me see, I have it up here. I literally just discovered this 20 minutes ago. WowAir.us is right now running promotions from Washington, D.C. and Boston. And then stay local. That's a great way to save money, but it's also a great way to interact with the locals. You know, yes, if you go to a Hilton, you know what you're going to get. And if you stay with a local place, you might not know what you're going to get. That's part of the experience. Sometimes you will be absolutely wowed by a local place. Other times you will want to leave as soon as you can. Lastly, take public transportation. I'm a big believer in public transportation, and I can't say enough about buses running on routes. You know where they're going. It's a great way to get places. Subways and that. It seems a little bit more like a hassle, but it's another great way to learn about the local culture. You're going to be traveling with the people the way they do it. Let's see, I'm reading some of these questions. Communication. So local phone situations, I think if you need to call the U.S., there's nothing better than Skype or some service like that. Google Voice is another great option. I highly recommend here in the U.S. too. I think some of my parents might even be on this, but I've transitioned them to buying GSM cell phones. So that is, you go and buy, next time you want an iPhone or your phone, actually go buy it and buy it directly from Apple or Samsung or Motorola. And these will work on AT&T, T-Mobile. Those are kind of the two big ones. And then a lot now will work on Verizon and Sprint as well, especially the more expensive ones. Check to make sure. But then when you go to another country, you put in a local SIM card. So you'll go to, in Europe, you can go to like a T-Mobile type store and get a local SIM card and have a local number. There's a lot of there's a lot of people who think, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to pay the $20 and be able to have my same number for the U.S. That's great for people from the U.S. calling you. That's a problem for making local communication, because now you're forcing the person, say you're in France, you're forcing them to make an international call to reach you. I don't necessarily think that's going to be beneficial to you when you're in kind of a situation where you need to call a cab, you need to use a phone for your on-the-ground communication. Having a local number, there are real benefits to it. A couple things said, Wi-Fi is widely available. Someone mentioned use Viber every day to talk to my wife for free. Absolutely. There are a lot of services who you can make free Wi-Fi telephone calls, access the internet. I didn't find we needed to actually get cell data service that much. Let me see. Personal security. I can see there. I think there have been a couple questions that came up about kind of general security. This is obviously, it's a very personal situation-to-situation thing that you just never know. I mean, you can have personal security issues in Minneapolis just as well as you can have them in Tanzania. There's situational things to it. I am always vigilant. I think one of the best things you can do to be secure is to carry less. The more you're carrying, the more bags you're reaching in. Every time you're looking for something, and it could be in this bag, it could be in that bag, you're not paying attention to your surroundings. So there is some real safety in not having much with you and knowing exactly what you have. So if you have one bag that's small, that you're mobile, you're going to be a lot safer than if all of a sudden you need someone else to carry that bag for you. I highly recommend that you carry as little as possible. And so that's going to bring us to our next thing. This picture in the background is everything we carried on our trip for 2.5 years. In fact, there are a bunch of things in here that we got to our first country and we actually sent back. But I can tell you, that orange jacket, I still wear that. I was wearing it biking over the weekend. There is a red hat up there that I could see. It is in my bag. I wore it today. So a lot of these things actually made it all the way back with us, and maybe it's because I'm cheap, but I still use them. Excuse me, sorry, you're kind of getting a manly nasal voice from me today. I have a little bit of a cold. So in terms of packing, I think you should remember that basically everything you need is wherever you're going. You'll find that the places you are generally have the clothes for where you're going. There are a lot of people who think, oh, I'm going on a trip, so I need to get something new. Your pants work just as well in South America as they do here. Unless you're having your own personal pant problem, I think all your clothes should work wherever you go. The one thing that I highly recommend for people going to cold weather climates is get a lightweight down jacket. They're around $200. You can get them, if you're in Minnesota, at the second floor of Midwest Mountaineering. Otherwise, wait for sales at REI and Sierra Trading Post. If they're 800 plus down fill, they'll weigh under a pound, and then you can squeeze them down to the size of a small Ziploc bag. They are so useful. They will keep you warm. And then along with that, I highly recommend a Gore-Tex shell, or there's some good waterproof shells now to keep you dry. Basically, if you're dry and warm, you're going to be healthier and enjoy your trip a lot more. That last line looks like it's been cut off. So I do have a website, Days to Travel. I've been working on a book of how to see these places in the best places in the world in 1 to 2 weeks of vacation. And at this site, daystotravel.com, you can go. I have some kind of travel gear guides and whatnot that link straight through to Amazon if you're interested. If you're interested in getting some of these sample chapters, I don't have someone to publish it at this point. I haven't gone through and really started marketing it other than doing the design work, getting all the photos in there. Go to Days to Travel right now and put your name in there, and I will send out some of the basic chapters. I think there was a question about Thailand. If you email me, I will actually send you, I have a sample chapter of Thailand that I can send to you. That's a lot of places, a lot of people have been going for honeymoons and things like that have found that useful. The next question I see here, where in South America do I recommend? I love South America. I studied abroad in Chile for a year, and I've spent more than 18 months in the continent as a whole. I have to say, on looking at a continent, it depends what you want to do. Carnival is one of the, in Brazil, is one of the most fun things you can do, plain and simply. I've been to a lot of festivals and different things around the world. Carnival is amazingly fun and festive. It is a country that just wants to go dance and listen to music for several days. I highly recommend Brazil during Carnival. It is extraordinarily expensive. I can't stress that enough. So besides that, I love Argentina and Chile, especially as you go down into Patagonia. As a hiker, someone who likes to be in nature, there are very few places like Patagonia. That said, if you were to go to one country in South America, it has to be Peru. I will put my stake in the ground and say Peru is the one-stop shop of South America. You can go see the ancient ruins of the Inca Trail and things around in that area. You can go to the mountains. There's some world-class mountaineering up near Juarez, in the northern part of Peru. There is the rainforest you can go to, and then it's incredible tourist infrastructure. You can get around the country. They speak English extraordinarily well, well-trained tour guides through and through. I've been to Peru 3 or 4 times, and each time I go back, I discover a new place that makes me want to come back again. Any special health precautions? Yes, I think this is definitely on an individual basis as well. I have terrible allergies. That's why you're getting this version of Matt's voice. It depends on you. Go to a travel clinic. I use Park Nicollet here in town. There are lots of great doctors who can make sure you're immunized and you have what you need for the country you're going to. I think we will always tend to over-immunize or give more medicine than is needed, but there are times where you will be thankful to have that medicine and to not have to go through to a local doctor. I had to go to a hospital in India. I do not recommend that. How much do you consider guided tours versus DIY? My wife and I do as much do-it-yourself as possible. We do that, number one, because we're traveling on a budget. I mean, I'm going to be completely straightforward. We traveled for 2 years, 9 months, and spent about $90,000 total. That includes the fairly expensive tour to Antarctica and North Korea. We generally spend about $50 a day, but that was because we were in the developing world. We have done Europe before. I would not recommend trying to be super budget in Europe because some of the sites, some of those museums, it is worth paying for. If you're going to kind of more developing world, you can do everything you want to do and more on quite a budget. And so we do as much DIY as we can, or we get local guides. I enjoy the finding the local people, talking to fellow travelers, and then sorting it out there. Let's see, comments on the Middle East, Israel, and Egypt. I love historic sites. Egypt is far and away the best place for that. There are great historic, ancient sites in the world. Egypt just blew my mind. I think right now it's obviously there's a lot of negative press about it. That is kind of a buyer's opportunity. I don't find it terribly dangerous. A comment just came through. we were there during the protest. Tahrir Square, they were going, we were about 2 blocks off of Tahrir Square. Protests came by. Everyone just let us, stand there. Someone brought a chair out for my wife to stand on so that she could, take pictures of the crowds as they came by. Their issues have generally not been with us, which is quite helpful. And then they are a tourist-based society, and when the tourists aren't coming, it is creating a little bit more of a problem. Let's see. I said 90,000, and so that came up for about 930 days, a little more like $100 a day. Aaron, okay, now I see your comment of, yes, Egypt, there are going to be issues, and I see another comment about Egypt for females, and my wife actually wrote in as well. If you're a female, you really want to be with a man. I know people who do it independently as females, and I want to be as supportive as I can of female independent travelers. The feedback that I got from a lot of females traveling there was the attention and potential for uncomfortable situations is quite high. That is actually in a lot of the world, in the Middle East as a whole, and then in India. Let's see. What are good off-the-beaten path places for family with young kids? I have never had to travel with kids, so this is going to be completely off the cuff, and you specifically asked about Nepal. There were people who did Nepal with what I would consider young kids for what it was, but they could hike on their own for kind of miles a day, so probably in the 10 to 12 range. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for people before the point they could carry and hike their own stuff. I do think that it is another off-the-beaten-track type of place. I would head towards Peru, Juarez. You don't have the time zone difference, and there are some of the National Geographic classifies as some of the best hikes in the world in that area, anything from 3 days to 20 days. I can see someone said Nepal, Pokhara, and name of a city that I know I should know how to pronounce, but I can't actually, Gandruk, maybe I'll butcher it, is a great place for families. I agree. Other people I know who don't like hiking have really enjoyed the Kathmandu Valley, Pokhara, and Gandruk. I see a question about European river cruises. I have never done them. My in-laws have. Loved them. Absolutely loved them. I think Viking Cruise is the big one. They've done them actually in Europe and in China. Highly recommended. I know the Alumni Association has some offerings as well. Let's see, bicycle trips. I don't do enough bicycle trips other than my daily commuting. We ride quite a bit, and I have not yet gotten to do some. There are people who have recommended some of the French and California biking trips. Someone says bicycling in the Netherlands. Yes, that's great because it's flat. Though the people who have enjoyed France and California, there tend to be winery tours. Obviously, that could be a lot of fun. There's a question, did I save the money beforehand, or did we work while we were abroad? No, we had saved the money beforehand. We did this purely out of savings. What do I think about trips to Disney World or Disneyland? Well, Justin, I think if your kids want to go to Disney World or Disneyland, you should take them. I love it. I hope my parents aren't listening, but I once was supposed to go on a college visit to USC, and I actually went to Disneyland for the day by myself. I love Disney World and Disneyland. So, yes, Justin, I think you're probably upstairs right now. You should definitely take your kids. I will start sending them letters about how their dad is going to take them there. Um, how do I take care of mail when you're gone all the time? I do not have a house. There are services that you can have scan your mail. I think one of the things that you got to do is disconnect yourself from all mailing lists, and there's a bunch of things online how to see how to get rid of junk mail, but then there are services that will scan them or move as much as you can digital, and then that is it's a hard question for homeowners. Um, so there's a good question here. Would I recommend doing short trips to different places or do one long trip to see as many things as possible? This is a hard question. We chose to do it in one go. That was part budgetary constraints and also the way we wanted to do it. I think there's real value though in short trips. I believe that part of the learning from travel is to be able to come back and reflect upon your experiences, and that coming back and seeing the differences in cultures and being able to consolidate that learning. That's something that we were not fully able to do in doing the long trip. I think long trips are, I think short trips are a great way to do it, and the world is very accessible. So do what you can. I see a question about prepaid Visa cards for use abroad. Um, we have never done that. We simply use, credit cards are not fully accepted in a lot of places in the world. They want cash, and that's where I can't say enough about look at those online brokerages, Schwab, Fidelity, Scottrade, with free ATM withdrawals, and people prefer cash. Let's see. There's a bunch of questions coming in about kind of Eastern Europe and stuff. Probably send me some of those questions. My wife has been there. I actually have not. There is someone who has said, Nicole here has said, Southern Czech Republic is a cheaper version of Tuscany with great bike trails and winery. I think I'm going to try to find out because that sounds like a lot of fun. Galapagos, you need to have a tour. The question came from Chris. Yes, you need to be on a tour, and that's for the ecological protection of the area, and then you go on a boat. I highly recommend that. Do I hand wash all my clothes? Yes, at times, but in a lot of places in the world there is quite cheap by-the-pound laundry. This goes to a packing tip that I have. Don't bring anything you're not willing to destroy or have destroyed. So if you love it, if you're going to cry when it's gone, don't bring it on your trip. Leave it at home. If you have dirty clothes, which we all will have, definitely go and just have it done by the pound. So my wife said we didn't necessarily bring cheap things. We had a ton of North Face gear. I think they make really good gear, Mountain Hardwear. A lot of those brands, the quality is definitely worth paying for, but at the same time, we mentally accept it. If they get destroyed, they get destroyed. Speaking about health, okay, Elizabeth, you got a funny comment here. I noticed a large bottle of Tums on your wall. Do I recommend Tums as a must-have? Some. I found it is really, when you need it, you need it. And so have it with you. Otherwise, there's always local alternatives. Let's see. What is good to see in Turkey, especially outside of Istanbul? We rented a car from Istanbul and then drove to the Aegean and Mediterranean coast. I highly recommend that. The coastal cities were gorgeous. My father travels a decent amount more, but he's kind of particular with it. He loved it. Maybe it was my great driving and fake tour giving. Let's see. We have 3 minutes left, so let's see what we can do. This is going to be a lightning round. I am Elizabeth. I am not a classical music lover where I've sought it out on a trip, so I'm sorry I can't really answer places in Vienna. If anyone can, feel free to put. No comments on Colombia from Peter. I love Colombia. Great place, friendly people. It's intriguing history. Cartagena, my wife just came in. Yeah, Colombia's a great time. I highly recommend it. Let's see what else. Any recommendations on the best, safest place to travel as a solo female? Something tells me that the answer will show up on my screen shortly. Oh, someone says U.S., New Zealand, Canada. Yeah, absolutely. There, as a single female, Southeast Asia is very safe. A lot of people go there as single females. They meet people. They travel. We've made lifelong friends in the area. But yeah, U.S., New Zealand, Canada, you will never go wrong with those. What about food safety? In developing countries, you will get sick. It varies. China, we ate street food the entire time, never got ill. They cook it right in front of you, and I like to be able to see that. There's this perception that I think we have of if you're cooking behind in a kitchen, it's clean. In a lot of places, I say no. If you're cooking it in front of me and I can see that, I trust it a lot more. Okay, I'm just going to read one comment, and someone has gotten ill many times in China. So last comment, I'm just going to read a solo female in Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Chile. I can totally say those would be great places to be as a single female. You'll get helpful males, maybe too helpful. All right, am I out of time?
Matt, thank you so much. I'm going to put up your contact information right now. What a great webinar. So here is Matt's contact information. So we have Matt at days2travel.com, his Facebook page, Days to Travel, and then at his Twitter at Days to Travel. So Matt, I mean, if people have more questions, here, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
Email is probably the best.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Matt. This was fascinating and wonderful, so we really appreciate having you here.
No problem.
Our next webinar is coming up on Thursday, February 12th at noon, entitled The Job Search Inside Scoop, Tips from Recruiters. We also have another interest-based webinar coming up called Guiding Parents in the Age of Overindulgence on March 6th. You can sign up for these and other upcoming webinars at www.minnesotaalumni.org/alumni webinar series, and we hope you can join us. You can also, if you're on social media, be sure to connect with the University of Minnesota Alumni Association on Twitter, LinkedIn, or visit our home webpage to see all of our different channels. In closing, members of the University of Minnesota Alumni Association make new initiatives like this webinar series possible. Thank you. Because of members, we can enrich the lives of alumni, support student success, and make a better University of Minnesota. Become a member today at www.minnesotaalumni.org/join. This is the conclusion of today's webinar. Thank you for joining us and being an active member in the worldwide community of the University of Minnesota alumni and friends. Have a wonderful day, and Skye Ma.